I'm not an economist. I'm a political scientist. I happen to believe that the kind of growth you get matters on the basis of who's leading it. What does it mean that we're going from a world where the developed countries were doing most of the driving to one where the emerging markets are doing most of the driving? Number one, you get an absence of governance, because the level of political willingness to do global lifting, there are costs implied, there are responsibilities implied with global leadership. Emerging markets have less experience and less willingness to engage in providing those responsibilities and costs, that stakeholdership. And it's not just true of China. It's true of Brazil. It's true of Turkey. It's true of Russia. We're going to see less governance. The G0 matters in that regard. Secondly, you're going to see a lot more volatility. I know that if you look at peripheral countries in Europe, we call them increasingly submerging markets, Greece and Ireland and Portugal and Spain. And economically, they're not going to be performing very well over the next year. They won't be performing very well over the next several years. The austerity is going to hurt. But you know what? They're not emerging markets. The political stability, yes, even of relatively volatile peripheral states in Europe in terms of rule of law and in terms of the legitimacy of their political institutions and in terms of their baseline social instability, compares very favorably to a country whose per capita income is under $10,000 a year. Even the non-authoritarian ones, still much more brittleness over the long term. The volatility in a world where the emerging markets are doing the driving is much greater than one where it's the developed world. That has implications for how you invest. You should hedge a lot more. You should be much more diverse in your portfolio allocation. But it also has implications in how we think about the world, in the risks that are incumbent on us in the world. Number three, a world that has that level of rebalancing globally is one where relative gains and losses attribute to very different sets of actors. It's great to talk about a world where absolute gains are the only ones that matter. But as human beings, we don't live in a world like that. We don't like it when we don't do as well relatively to other economies. Do I believe that the US and China get in bigger fights over this structurally over the long term? Yes, I do. Do I believe that the West is going to engage in more economic populism, nationalism as a response to a structural change in who has access and availability to wealth and consumption capacity? Yes, I do. A world where the emerging markets are going to start doing most of the consuming and most of the growth is a world that will be fundamentally more conflict-laden, more violent, less ethical. There are implications of that.